You may not know this, but over the last 2 years or so, I've become quite fond of Sega's 8-bit home console, the Master System, or, as it's known here in Japan, the Sega Mark III. The reason being, I started studying how to program for the machine in assembly during graduate school as my final project. Yet, somehow, this will be the first SMS game that I'll be making a dedicated video on. I feel like I owe Master System Sagaia an apology. In my overview of the Darius Cosmic Collection a few years back, I called the game cute. I was quite dismissive of this port of the game, but now that I have a greater understanding of what the Master System is capable of, I'd like to rescind my previous statement, as this game is nothing short of a showcase for what the SMS was truly capable of. Sagaia on Sega Master System is 100% an 8-bit marvel. It is also, however, quite the oddity. Programmed by an all-Japanese team for a PAL exclusive release, I'm surprised they even went through the effort to put this thing together, let alone do such an incredible job with the port. If we take a look at where Sagaia is coming from, it's got a lot to live up to. A 32-bit looking, multi-layer parallax scrolling background, choose your own path, shoot 'em up with giant Piscine bosses and not one, but 2 screens. The Darius II arcade machine is truly a marvel to behold, though a bit on the unbalanced side when it comes to difficulty if you ask me. It is still a visually stunning game and a blast to play through, until you die in the later levels and can't recover your weapon power. It received many ports and reworkings, including a renaming in the Western release to Sagaia. It had to be cut down and shaped around a bit to get it running on a Sega Genesis, but to try and port it to the 8-bit Master System was a bold move. A bold move that ended up being, at least in my opinion, one of the best games in the entire console's library. While not all 28 stages from the arcade original were able to make the cut, almost certainly due to memory restrictions on the 8-bit hardware, there is still much replay value to be found traversing the game's 12 stages with 3 different endings, multiple difficulty levels, and 2 different playable ships, each of which has a boss completely unique to that ship found in Zone G. And, on top of that, the game is just a solid, fun challenge. Trying to see every level on every difficulty level with both ships was a joy for me. I found myself thinking about how to optimize my runs, how to get around tricky enemy patterns, and what kind of parallax scrolling I would see in the levels that I hadn't yet gone through. The balance and level design is a bit changed around too, so veterans of the arcade version or other ports can definitely still get a lot of mileage out of this one. One of my all-time favorite graphical effects in 8-bit gaming is the simulation of parallax scrolling on a single background layer. SMS Sagaia is filled with this. Almost every single level has some kind of multi-layered scrolling going on, from the fire swirling in the background of Zone A, to the cities and clouds of Zone G, to the mechanical cave of Zone F. Seeing how much effort the developers put into making sure there was always some kind of movement in the background of each level is simply mesmerizing. This is what an 8-bit Darius game can truly be. Game Boy Sagaia could learn a thing or two from this game. The bosses are equally well done. Most of the bosses in Sagaia are made up of the SMS's background layer graphics. By default, the Master System can only show a maximum of 64 sprites on screen at once, and only 8 sprites on the same horizontal scan line. So instead of using sprites for big bosses like Hypersting, the background is instead set to a solid black color and is used to render the boss character. Whenever the boss moves, the entire background is actually scrolling. This is why so many 8-bit games on both the NES and SMS have their boss battles on a black background. There are some exceptions though, such as Driosam, who instead is just programmed in such a way that more than 8 sprites rarely cross over the same horizontal line at a time. And as beautiful as this game looks, the gameplay is just as good. This is a tight version of Darius II. There's little downtime, and reaction times have to be quick, else you'll be overwhelmed. Autofire is a welcomed blessing, but there's one big problem when it comes to controls that brings down the entire experience just a bit. Your forward shot and your downward arching bombs are mapped to separate buttons. On a Sega Genesis controller, this isn't much of an issue, but on a stock Master System controller, or as is in my case, the Sega Mark III controller, you'll soon have your hand cramp up before even reaching hypersting. And on a Mark III, Sega Genesis controllers don't work. I ended up switching between these two grip styles before I finally decided to take matters into my own hands. As I mentioned before, I've learned how to program for the Sega Master System, so I decided to take a look at how I could solve this hand cramping issue with a little bit of ROM hacking. Luckily for us, alternating controls on a Master System game isn't too terribly difficult. The first step is to find out where the button presses are handled, and thankfully the way that inputs are read is always the same. They must always be read from the input-output port for controller port 1, labeled hex DC. If we can find where this happens, then we can find out how the controls work. The emulator Emulicious redefines hex DC to be called port_IO port 1. So all we have to do is find out where in the code this is referenced, and that will lead us to the controller input. And sure enough, the following code saves the controller input from both the first player controller and the second player controller into their own dedicated spaces in RAM. Interestingly, the Player 2 controller serves no purpose in the final game, so this could be leftover code from an old 2-player mode that was scrapped, likely because of the massive slowdown we can already see in the single-player game. And we can see that the input data is saved at a place in RAM that I've renamed to port_1_input. So now all we have to do is find where this memory address is called again. And this code is exactly where it is called. However, we've also got a lot of unknown memory addresses around here. So I used the tried and true technique of guess and check to find out which ones affected the player's shot controls, and ended up discovering that the memory address, hexadecimal C5F9, is our weapons control. It actually works in a very simple way. If button 1 on the SMS is being pressed, then weapons control is set to the hexadecimal value 10, and only our main shot will fire. If button 2 is pressed, then weapon control is set to the hexadecimal value 20, and only our bombs will fire. And if both are being pressed, then weapons control is set to hexadecimal 30, and both our main shot and bombs will fire. Now, there are a lot of ways we could change the controls from here, but this is what I opted to do. We have 3 different checks when it comes to shooting. The first one checks if the main lasers are firing. The next checks if our low-level bombs are firing. The third check is a little different, and instead of checking that both buttons are held down, it instead checks if our ship's bombs have been upgraded and if our upgraded rapid-fire bombs are firing. I felt that using button 1 on the SMS controller was more comfortable, as it's normally the main firing button. So I decided to change the bomb check code to not look for the number hexadecimal 20, but instead look for hexadecimal 10. Or in other words, I changed the code to look for a button 1 press for both the main shot and the bombs. In the end, all I had to do was go in and change 2 bytes of code. I just had to find the code that runs the checks, open up the memory editor, and change the value of the check from hexadecimal 20 to hexadecimal 10, and BAM! Single button firing in Sagaia on Master System. Emulicious even lets you save your modified ROM as an IPS file for easy patching, which is exactly what I did, and have since uploaded it to both romhacking.net and my personal GitHub page, both of which will have links in the description if you're interested in trying this ROM hack out for yourself. I even did some further messing about and made button 2 into an on-controller pause button, though I couldn't get it to unpause the game, so that still has to be done from the console. Getting to dive into the code behind this incredible game was an experience I didn't think I'd ever be capable of just a couple of years ago. But being passionate about something can really take you almost anywhere, and because of this experience, Sagaia on Master System has become my favorite version of Darius II. Sure, it doesn't have the quality of life improvements and enhanced audio soundtrack of the PC Engine CD Super Darius II or the arcade accuracy of the Saturn port, but it pushes the limits of what an 8-bit Darius game can be. And the fact that I was able to take a peek at what's going on behind the curtains makes it all the more important of a game for me. I'm Bofner, and thanks for watching. See ya!